muted.
Let's go ahead and get started for this call today. First off, thank you everybody who's on the call for joining. I will be recording this webinar, so I will follow up with a quick email after we're done sometime later today or tomorrow morning with a few other resources and of course a link to the webinar. There's also a chat box in the GoToMeeting. At any time, if anybody has any questions at all or comments or feedback, please go ahead and throw them into the chat box and then we'll go ahead and address them as we go. So today's webinar, we're going to be doing a series on the 8 most common mistakes that we see when people are running an award, competition, grant, or call for entry. So my name is Kyle Fredrickson. I'm the Managing Director here at Reviewr. And we'll run through a quick agenda and then we'll dig a bit deeper into who I am and also who Reviewr is and why we're able to talk about these types of things today. So yeah, for the introduction, we're going to go into kind of battling these things alone. So why you shouldn't run an award program or a call for entry by yourself. We're going to go over, are you overthinking things? Oops, should I have collected that? This won't be that much work, right? The application that sinks the ship. One tweet to rule them all. Volunteers are just that, volunteers. And did this thing turn out like I'd hoped? So a little bit of Jeopardy style categories or agendas there. So to go ahead and introduce myself again, my name is Kyle and I'm the Managing Director here at Reviewr. And what we are is a web-based application that's used by a lot of different organizations to collect, manage, and review online applications. So the great thing about calls like this is that looking through the people who have joined, we've got a really variety of people. So we have current clients of ours, those that we've never met with. We have people who are running, really prestigious innovation and entrepreneurship competitions. We have a lot of associations and nonprofits on the call. We also have a few people that looks like are going to be doing different types of grants and RFPs. So the best part of my job is that while every one of these different types of organizations is very, very unique, and every program that they ran is very, very different, at its core the process still is the same. Everybody's collecting applications some way. They need to review it, they need to share it with their team, and at some point we've all got to make a decision. In the sense of like a Shark Tank style pitch competition, we got to pick who the winner is. In a grant program, of course, we have to figure out who we're going to award the grant money to. And in the sense of like a vendor RFP, we've got to pick who that vendor is going to be. So at a high level, that's the different types of products that we work with. Again, the type of organizations that we work with will range from, colleges, universities, from community colleges to, some of the biggest colleges, universities in the country, to accelerators, incubators, venture capital firms. We also work with a lot of different types of brands and marketing agencies that do marketing-focused contests, as well as different nonprofits and, associations. Quick story, I guess, about how we got to this point. So I'm very much like everybody on this call as well as our organization. Our whole team comes from a background similar to you guys. So we were very actively involved in these different types of programs, more or less as a volunteer. So we're part of the different review committees who is going to get sent binders, hard copy paperwork, and we were told, hey, you know what, this is a Saturday, thank you for volunteering your time. Now go sort through all these things, pick a winner, and then tell us who it is. So we did. It wasn't all that enjoyable, especially as a volunteer. We really didn't enjoy getting the hard copy paperwork. We hated using, survey builders and different type of spreadsheets, but we did it. What was most frustrating to us, though, is that, go through a couple of these comments here. So there might be a slight delay. The slide should be advancing. If it's still not advancing to the introduction, please let me know. So to kind of get back on topic where I was, what was most frustrating for our team is that when we were providing reviews about these online applications that we were doing, we were leaving pages upon pages of feedback and we were submitting it to the organization. And then at the end of the day, we'd see that they'd pick a winner or they'd go ahead and they'd say, here's who's going to win the grant money, here's everybody who didn't win, thanks again, try again next year. But unfortunately for us, we had given all that feedback and why didn't it get back in their hands? So that's what led us to build Reviewr. We thought that, if we were to build an online platform that's meant to run every single element of these programs, not only would make the lives easier for the organizations that we were volunteering for, but more importantly, all the participants who were involved would get a lot higher engaging experience. So the first thing we're going to talk about today is why you shouldn't go into battle alone. So a lot of the clients that we work with maybe just one single individual. And I know that that's not always the case, and that's not always possible to have a huge supporting cast around you, especially for some of our nonprofits and associations who do have pretty limited staffs and teams. But all we ask is that you don't go into these types of things by yourself. It's definitely okay to ask for help. So in the sense of some of the colleges that we work with, they bring on, graduate assistants, or some of the nonprofits might bring on an intern of some sort, some type of coworker. But on another end, there's definitely let's see here. So it looks like the slides aren't advancing. Can you leave a comment if you are still sitting at the main page? Okay, let's see what's on here. Are you able to see the introduction and the agenda pages now? Perfect. Well, let's go ahead and let's not do the presentation the right way. We'll go ahead and back out to my main screen. So if you guys see any of the pop-ups that come in my window, just go ahead and ignore those. Yeah, I guess jumping back into obviously where we're going today is why we shouldn't go into battle alone. So while not everybody can ask coworkers and interns and things like that to help them out, hopefully you do have some type of supporting cast, be that a service provider like us that might, become an extension of your team. Maybe you want to reach out to other industry experts. So maybe if you're a nonprofit or your association, look down the road at other nonprofits who are doing these things like you and just ask for a quick lending hand. Because as we all know, the small tasks will start to avalanche into a never-ending to-do list. From sending out reminder emails and communication to some of the marketing efforts to talking to your reviewers, running your reports, whatever it might be, it's very easy to skip over things. So when you can delegate, definitely do so. Also, when you go to do your delegation, try to find other experts. So, if you're a marketer, that's great. Keep marketing your award program. If you know somebody who's really, really good with logistics, they have a keen eye for detail, and maybe you want them to focus more on the applicants and the reporting, kind of delegate that task over to them. The second common mistake that we see in these types of programs are you overthinking this? And the really simple question to ask is, if you think that you're overthinking something, you probably are. It's like the old phrase, analysis by paralysis. The goal of these types of programs is to keep things really simple. One of the funny things that we always see is that people want to set deadlines for midnight. You know what, this isn't the Star Wars midnight premiere. Nobody's standing in line. While you might think you're building all this excitement and enjoyment about an application deadline, we all know that your applicants and all of your audience members, you know what, they're going to wait until the absolute minute. So if you give them that last minute as midnight, who's going to be around to help them? So think about it this way. What if we were to do a 10 a.m. or 11 a.m. deadline? That way, if there are issues that people are having, or if they're going to wait to the last minute, or they want to ask questions, you're going to be around to help them. You might have a little bit of a buffer. If you're working with a service provider like us, we can also help. As much as we want to help out our clients, midnight isn't always the best time to do so. Another thing that we see a lot of is over-cumbersome applications. And in a little bit, we'll talk a little bit more about the applications themselves, but they don't need to be 100 pages long. And yes, I've definitely seen that. 100 pages long with drop-downs and checkboxes and file uploads and videos, you name it. When your applicants join these types of things and they get to that second and third page, and then they get to a fourth page, and then a fifth page, and then a sixth page, do you really think they're going to finish, or are they going to leave? Same thing goes with the different types of rounds. You might want to think you want to do this giant tiered March Madness bracket style program where you have all these applications coming in, you assign them to your review team, you narrow it down again, a third time, a fourth time, a fifth time. Well, somebody's got to be a part of that review committee that's narrowing it down, and how much can we really ask of them? And then the last thing is going to be the scorecards or the evaluations themselves. They don't need to be 1 through a million. I guess there's definitely a time and place for everything. We see a lot of weighted scoring algorithms where some questions have higher, values than others, but let's not overcomplicate things. We have some people who do like a 12.25% for this category, a 17.3% for this one. Let's keep it simple. Let's keep it in quarters. Let's do a 1 through 5 or a 1 through 10. Let's give our judges maybe 10 questions to score things on. And again, if anybody has any comments or want to jump in, just please use that chat box. especially if you have real-time examples of things that you've seen. I'd love to address some of those. The next thing we're going to look at is more of a data collection perspective, and it's going to be called Oops, Should I Have Collected That? We've all been there. There's always been that meeting that we've gone to and somebody asks you a question. You say, oh no, I don't know the answer to that because I never collected the data. So in all these types of programs, whether or not you're trying to look at conversion rates or the number of applicants you've received or demographic information, it's really simple to grab. And even though our whole concept here is being simple, you can still collect a lot of data while keeping things basic. So what you want to do is work backwards. The first thing that we're always going to look at is say, okay, when I get to the review perspective and we have to make a decision, what are the key items that we're going to be deciding on? Let's make sure we include those in the application process, because again, if we collect it, we can report on it. The next thing that we're going to look at is, from a reporting perspective, what do I have to report on? You work backwards. So you say, I want to run reports on these 7 or 8 metrics, then add them to your application form. The one thing that's very commonly kind of looked over is going to be the key stakeholders. So you sat down, you went through the reports, you went through the review process, and you kind of pat yourself on the back and say, look, I got everything I need. And then what happens when somebody walks in and says, hey, I need these 5 metrics on my desk by tomorrow morning, and again, didn't collect them. So the last thing that we're going to want to do is talk to our key stakeholders and everybody involved in these different types of projects and ask them, okay, here's what I'm collecting now. What is it that you want to see later on? And oftentimes that comes down to progression. Some of the government groups that we work with have to report back at the end of the year some of the metrics that they're given as far as feasibility and if their program's going to kind of keep progressing or not. Same thing goes for you guys. What happens if we don't meet our expectations, which we'll talk about later? Where are we going to go to look at what went wrong and how to improve on it? So again, data is always king, and that just doesn't mean that it can't be simple. We're going to want to keep things basic, but we still want to capture the data. The next thing we're going to look at is how much work are these programs really going to be to run. A lot of groups that we work with are first-time groups. So, yes, we do have some award programs that have been going on for 40, 50 years, and that's great. But a lot of people pick up the phone and call us and say, hey, you know what, we're a small nonprofit. We want to recognize our members by running a really basic award program. And they say, you know what, that's not going to be that much work. We probably need you guys for a couple different things. But the first thing that we always tell them is, yes, it is going to be a lot of work. And that's not a bad thing. Anything worth doing is going to take time and effort. And that goes back to the very first slide that we did about, supporting yourself with other people to help you out. Don't try to take on too much and end up just giving up and taking the easy way out. You're also going to hear a lot of times where people say, you know what, I don't have that many applicants, so it's not going to be a lot of work. And we'll rebuttal by saying, you know what, it might be more work then, because since you have fewer people participating, that just gives you the opportunity to be much more engaging with them. You're able to do much more touch points, a lot more communication. We're going to make it the best possible experience for them, so that way next year there are more applicants, and then you can keep growing the program over and over. The next thing we'll look at is the application that sinks the ship. So what this means is, the application forms are completely cumbersome. What we're always going to talk about is that a well-planned application process is the #1 way to increase participation. So yes, marketing is 100% important, and we will get to that as well. But what happens when you plan out a huge marketing push? You have thousands and thousands of people who go to your process, they click start, and they see 100 pages, and they leave. So you did a great job up front getting the traffic there, but now we have no conversions. So a good example is, remember your first job. When you're applying for your first job, you're going through kind of different resume builders and going through career searches, and you're asked for application form after application form after application form. Every one of them is asking for so much things, and then it asks you for a letter of recommendation. But then, of course, in your application form, you also have to put who your letter's from. Then you got to type in your resume and attach it as a PDF. You got to package it together. You got to email it to them. How many of those are you actually going to do? Probably very, very few. That's the exact same way that our applicants feel about these types of processes. So they want to work at their own pace. In a common application process, your user is going to go to the website, they're going to look at what type of data they have to have prepared, and then they're going to leave. And that's okay. That goes back to your deadlines of being maybe 10 o'clock in the morning. Let them leave. We know who they are. They're going to be working on this at their own time. They're going to maybe save, come back later, save again, come back later, and then right to the last minute, then they're finally going to be able to submit. But the good news is they probably spent more time working on it than if they crammed it at the very last minute. And then the last thing on this is please, please, please don't make anybody email application forms with attachments. So yes, it's one thing to prepare on your own time offline. They can compile Word docs and PDFs, and that's great. But when they go to email it to you, two things happen. One of which, they have to attach everything. So if they have photos and videos and letters of recommendation that are too big, guess what? They're not going to go through. Oh, what's that? They waited to the last minute. How are they going to get it to you? On the other end of things, when you wake up the next morning, we already have cluttered inboxes. Do we really want to decipher those important emails versus those who are applications to whatever program you're running? Probably not. Same thing goes for things like Dropbox and Box.com. Yes, they're awesome for storing documents. What they're not awesome for is for you guys to have to go back later on, pull all the documents, try to figure out who they pair up with, and then somehow get it to your team for review. Looking at some of the marketing items, let's look at kind of the one tweet to rule them all. So we're always going to emphasize quality over quantity. It is absolutely key that you do marketing. I talked about it earlier, that there's two pieces to the increasing the application volume. Number one is marketing, and number two is making it simple for them. What we often see happening, though, is that we kind of delay the marketing. We assume, especially kind of us nonprofits and associations, that our members are going to do all the work. They're going to be the ones who are kind of talking about it. We really can't increase our membership too much for some of our associations because it's state-based. It's only 50 states. So what happens then? How do we get people to actually apply? Well, they wait till the last minute and they throw a quick tweet out there, or they get on Facebook and say, hey, don't forget the deadline's in 2 hours, and people do it. That's not the best way of doing things. Running these types of projects should be a full-time marketing effort from start to finish. It should be no different than a for-profit company who's doing a massive marketing push for a new product. Step number one is that we want to build a marketing strategy. Now, these marketing strategies are going to start very, very early. We'll often hear from people that say, well, you know what, I had nobody apply this year. And our question to them is, well, why is that? Did you start to collect interest early on? Well, no, of course not. So the first thing that we're going to do is marketing landing pages. What we want to do is to showcase and announce whatever project it might be. And we're going to collect really basic information. We want to know who the person is, what their email is, and maybe their phone number. So now we're building this list of people who are somewhat interested in whatever project it might be, from an RFP to a competition to a grant, whatever it is. Maybe leading up until the actual program, you take that list of people and then you send them a quick email saying, hey, thank you for showing interest. Now let's go ahead and start the application process. So you can take this large funnel of people that you probably want to capture beforehand and kind of handhold them into the actual application process. Next is you want to build backlinks from some of your partners. So again, we're not going at this alone. We all have some type of organization that we work side by side with, in the sense of maybe a playing competition. You want to reach out to the local newspaper, some of the local colleges. If it's a industry-related association, reach out to the different trades that are out there. Provide a backlink back to your site so all the website traffic that they get can go back to you. Next is social sharing. It's really easy for us to sit behind a computer and share and tweet repeatedly about our own programs. But what's more powerful, a tweet coming from me, the organization, or the actual applicants themselves? So make it really simple for them to say, hey, I just participated in program XYZ. I'm going to put this on Facebook, Twitter, Google+, LinkedIn, whatever it might be. So all of their peers and people from the same industry can also go ahead and join in. Next is going to be your drip email campaigns. So we kind of start with the marketing push. We got a lot of website traffic. We captured some data. We got them coming back to finish. We got the social word of mouth going on. Now what? We don't just want to forget about them. This is where the email drip campaigns come into place. So a couple ways that we can do this. Keeping people up to date with visibility. One of the most common things that we hear from applicants is that they click submit and have no idea where they're at in the process or what the next steps might be. So it's really easy to take people as you progress them, send them a quick email saying, hey, you progressed to round 2, congratulations, here are the next dates and the deadlines, or unfortunately you didn't make it to the next phase of review, here's a link to see some of the feedback why, or however we want to go about doing that. Save the dates are also incredibly important. So these programs don't just end. There's always got to be some type of end marketing. It could be, public post-event celebrations with photos and videos. For a lot of you guys, it's going to be a gala. So please start marketing the save the date so people can know about it. And then lastly, surveys. Much like how I'm going to send you guys a survey, everybody wants to kind of know how the program went. How are you going to be able to improve if you don't know from your applicants and your participants firsthand kind of what they felt about it? So the surveys are the last piece of that, and those surveys kind of go hand in hand with the marketing landing page. So your landing page, as soon as these projects end, are going to flip over to more lead gen, and then also kind of post-event celebration and surveys. And let's talk a bit more about the volunteers, because they are just that. They're volunteering and they're giving up their time. So a volunteer is going to come in a lot of different shapes. For a lot of you, it's going to be the review teams. They're the ones who are giving up their weekends to look at all the applications, score them, kind of give them a thumbs up, a thumbs down, whatever your process looks like. But they also might be in the sense of an award program, somebody who's doing the nominations. You know, they're going to go out of their way to nominate somebody else. Let's make it incredibly easy for them to do that. Let's not ask them to do more than they have to. We're going to make their lives easier. Please, no volunteer wants to use spreadsheets. They don't want to download things. You know, I use a Mac, so for me, if I'm given Excel spreadsheets, I'm told to go to PowerPoint, I struggle with it, as you guys could see by trying to share it earlier today. My Mac doesn't do well with those things. So if you're going to give me a lot of Word documents and spreadsheets, I can't even download them. So how can I do my volunteer duties? Let's also not overlook the applicants themselves. They're going to come to you guys at some point saying, you know, hey, here's this. 3 weeks later, here's an email with, you know, this attachment. Or if you guys are using a vendor like ours, they still might try to email you things. Don't let them take the easy way out, especially with things like letters of recommendations. Let them submit their own letter of recommendation. What you don't want to have to do as a nominator is to not only nominate somebody, but also go out there and get other people to write letters of recommendation and then send it on their behalf. Better yet, why don't we let the actual letters of recommendation submit their own letters? So that way you have kind of 3 main users. You have the nominator, you have the person who is nominated, and then that's the person who is submitting any supporting documents because they're the ones who know best about it. And then lastly, let's try to do as much as we can virtual. We've actually heard from quite a few different organizations that they'll lock their review teams in a room for 8 hours. They bring them sandwiches and say, okay, here are all the different applications that we have. Please sort through them, talk amongst yourself, and then I'll come back in 8 hours, and we're going to figure out, you know, who the winner might be or who's going to get this year's grant. Trust me, those reviewers don't want to be locked together for 8 hours. Last item here is going to be, did this turn out like I had hoped? The main thing that we want to look at here is setting realistic expectations. We once had a client that came to us saying that they're going to run this nationwide marketing contest. They already expect to have well over 200,000 applicants, and then when things wrapped up, they only had, you know, 400, which by no means is a small number. It's huge. But when your expectations were 200,000, you only got 400. What happened? What went wrong? And the answer is probably nothing went wrong. It was just missed expectations up front. So the best ways about going and setting your expectations is to figure out from prior experience what you are expecting, and then leverage that for planning. So a good example of that would be kind of your applicant to reviewer ratio. If you have 5 or 6 people on your review committee and you get 100, 200, 300 applications, do you really expect every single one of those reviewers to look at every single one of those applications? Probably not. So looking at past data, if you say, oh, I had 200 applications last year, and you guys can bring in 50 to 100 reviewers, give every one of them 2 to 3 to 4 applications to review, it's a much more manageable number. Same thing goes with the number of rounds. If you get, you know, 500 applications, are you supposed to turn a switch and say, okay, I'm going to go from 500 to the top 3? Probably not. It's going to be much more competitive than that. So dictate the number of workflows and rounds you have based on the volume of applications you get. And then you can take that data and actually increase your expectations each year. So everybody's going to have unique goals. Is it, you know, I want to have a lot higher quality in the top 5, or do I want to have a lot more applications in general? Do I want more reviewers to participate? Do I want more members to become part of my association? Do I want more sponsorship and more funding from our donors? What are those goals, and how do we get there? And then lastly, relay those expectations to your stakeholders. So yes, you might have very realistic expectations, but when you go to report and go to your stakeholders and kind of announce the results, and they kind of wonder, why did it go this way? It's because they didn't know what you were expecting. So make sure everybody's on the same even playing field. I would love to get into a Q&A. More importantly is to learn kind of unique things about everybody's program, so I can kind of talk specifically about possible ways that I won't say improve, but that we can leverage some of our background to kind of help grow in those specific fields. But I know we had an issue with the screen share earlier, and I apologize. But if there's only 8 key takeaways you guys can take from today, they're going to be these. Don't try to do everything yourself. Support yourself with a group of people who are experts in different fields. If you're a marketer, bring in somebody else who's more logistic. If you're very logistic, bring in somebody else to help with the marketing efforts. Keep things simple. There is no need to overthink things. The concept of collecting applications, managing them, and then reviewing them is a really simple process. Don't clutter with everything else in between. Double check to make sure you collect necessary data. Again, we don't want to be the person who goes to a board meeting and has said, hey, I need these 6 metrics, and you don't have them. It's really easy up front to say, what do I need down the road, and then collect them now. Be prepared to work. Again, it's not a lot of work to run these programs. We can definitely keep it simple, but to run a very successful, award, a grant, or scholarship, you got to be required to do the effort. We want to make this the most engaging experience as possible for everybody. It's not just sitting behind a computer and opening applications, closing them, and judging them. There's a lot of things that go into it. Your well-planned application process is the #1 way to increase participation. You worked really hard to get people to your site. You worked really hard to kind of showcase your program. Don't allow people to start the application process and then never come back. There's a lot of things that we can do to kind of track those people, sending follow-ups, and then more important, making sure that they have no issues kind of going through the applications. The next is to don't overlook the marketing. We want to build a year-round plan. We'll be doing another webinar here shortly called kind of keeping people engaged during the off-season. One thing that we hate is the word off-season because there is no turning off an award program. Yes, there's going to be times of the year where things are more basic. RFPs specifically, if you're doing a request for proposal, you're only going to be opening and closing it during the selection process. But that doesn't mean that you can't still be marketing the concept all year round. Don't overlook your volunteers. They're just that. They're volunteering their time. And then set realistic expectations. I know a lot of us are probably joining these webinars during our lunch breaks, and I definitely don't want to keep you from your food, but if you have any questions, please leave them in the chat box so we can start to go through them. So one question that we got is, does our system, Reviewr, allow people to manage different award programs and have different reviewers for each award? And the answer is absolutely yes. And this isn't just specific to an award program. This also might be towards an RFP where you're looking for multiple vendors and different things. In the sense of an entrepreneurship-focused competition, there's probably going to be different categories. Scholarships specifically, you're going to have different scholarships for different types of people. And what you want to do, ideally, is match up your applicants with other industry experts. So the way that our platform will actually work is a concept called buckets. And what you're going to end up doing is creating a bucket for each one of these workflows. So as an applicant, I submit, and in the submission form, it says, oh, hey, you chose this, this, and this. So by default, I'm going to put you into this bucket. The next thing that you're going to do is fill up that bucket with whatever that review team might be. So if you want to do industry experts, that's great. If you want to have like a phase 1 review panel versus a phase 2, that's also great. So then what happens is whenever those reviewers log into their account, they're only going to see the applications in their bucket. And I guess to go one step further, if you want to actually open up your buckets, you can maybe pair people up specifically and say, this person's from Nebraska, they should probably be reviewing this Nebraska submission, so you can link them together. So that's definitely a great question. Any other questions we have today? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and go to this last slide. We do have 2 more upcoming webinars. I'm glad we were able to figure out why the screens wouldn't advance. So next time we can kind of fix that beforehand. But on Tuesday, March 15th at 1 o'clock Central Time, we're going to be doing another webinar on keeping users engaged during your programs. I'll be talking about all the different tactics about keeping people engaged, but also why there shouldn't be an off season. And then on Tuesday, April 5th at 2 p.m. Central Time, we're going to do a webinar on how to collect key data all year round, 24/7. And not just all year round, but also every aspect of your program, from the application process Judging, we'll talk about public voting and how that's a really great tool to increase participation, also kind of figure out who those people are. So go ahead, head to our website. You're going to see a link to maybe check out future webinars. I'm also going to go ahead on the last page and stay here for a little bit and answer future questions that people have. So yes, I will be sending this out afterwards, so please go ahead and watch it again. If you have any questions, let us know. We're always here to help out, but I'll stick around for another 10 or 15 minutes to help answer questions that might pop up.